দর্শক আমন্ত্রণ আরটিভির নিয়মিত আলোচনা অনুষ্ঠান ফোর্থ রাইটে আপনাদের সঙ্গে আছে আমি সৈয়দ আশিক রহমান। এই অনুষ্ঠানে আমরা কথা বলি বিভিন্ন সেক্টরের বিশেষজ্ঞদের সাথে যারা বাংলাদেশের কাজের অভিজ্ঞতা, উদ্দেশ্য এবং ভবিষ্যৎ পরিকল্পনা নিয়ে আলোচনা করেন। আমাদের আজকের অতিথি বাংলাদেশে জাতিসংঘের আবাসিক সমন্বয়ক মিস মিয়া সেপ্পো। Very welcome, Miss Mia Seppo at RTV Studio.
Thank you.
How do you find it here, and how long you have been in Bangladesh?
I have been in Bangladesh now for a bit more than 5 months.
So 5 months?
Yes. So I'm obviously still very new on the job and still learning the context and learning about Bangladesh.
So within 5 months, though it is not a big time, but I hope you get a bit about Bangladesh.
Sure. I mean, these 5 months have been very eventful. Obviously, I came in when at the height of the Rohingya refugee crisis, which continues. So that has required a lot of attention. I would say probably more of my time than anything else. And then we had the graduation from least development country status, Bangladesh meeting the three criteria in the first review, which was an excellent event and something really that the country can be proud of. So interesting times.
Ms. Seppo, before Bangladesh, where you serve actually, do you have, it is your first assignment in Bangladesh?
Of course, my first time in Bangladesh. So I've served in Africa, I've served in the former Soviet Union, I've served in the UN headquarters in New York.
You served in South Africa or Africa?
In Malawi, which is Southern Africa, and in Sierra Leone, which is West Africa.
Let's talk about the recognition of Bangladesh as development country for good economic and social progress. We are already stepping in development. How do you explain this definition?
What you have is a development story which is really interesting. You have a country that had a lot of odds against it at independence in 1971, which then manages to get close to you know, first meeting the 3 criteria for LDC graduation, which just happened, and then likely 21 meeting this criteria a second time. That is a remarkable journey. Lifting 50 million people out of poverty is commendable. That there's few countries that's been able to do that. And this progress is then reflected in better enrollment and attainment of keeping girls in school. It's more women in the labor force, because women obviously have a key role to play in terms of moving the country forward. It is reflected in having been able to fight some of the major diseases like smallpox or cholera. It's seen in improvement in terms of mother and child mortality, plateauing of fertility rates.
There is a huge development in our country.
There's a lot that Bangladesh has achieved and that Bangladesh can be very proud of.
Thank you for your recognition. In your view, what are the challenges for Bangladesh near future, and what are the opportunities as well?
So I believe the challenges are diversifying the economy and making sure that there is an investment in human development, in health and in education, in the people of Bangladesh, so that no one is left behind, which is the principle of the Sustainable Development Goals. The opportunities obviously lies in that it's a big population, it's a big market, there's a vibrant young labor force.
The demographic dividend we are getting.
Definitely. I think Bangladesh, certainly, there's a lot of expertise within the country itself, and Bangladesh needs to think about the environment, natural resource management, and tackling climate change, something that's clearly much on the agenda. And then I believe there's, you know, Bangladesh speaks about and the government talks about shared prosperity. And this is really important, you know, proper growth, inclusive growth and sustainable growth.
Would you please share your impression on the social and economic standing of Bangladesh?
Bangladesh is quite dependent on the RMG sector.
Exactly.
That obviously needs to evolve. As
leather products, we have leather products also.
Absolutely. So when you look at the growth strategy of the government, it's getting into leather, it's getting into pharmaceuticals, it's getting into IT. And it's this diversification that needs to happen, because the RMG sector is not going to be able to create the jobs that, that you need when you have a big number of young people entering the labor market. There is a need to make sure that as the economy grows, it is growth which is inclusive and doesn't leave either regions or groups of people behind, and the whole country is moving forward with the agenda of shared prosperity. After
UN recognition, what do you think about the major achievement of Bangladesh?
I think the major achievement is lifting a great number of people out of poverty. And I think a major achievement is also the fact that you know, the number of people that have been lifted out of poverty includes people who are among the poorest of the poor. So it hasn't been growth that has only benefited a few. It's been fairly far and broad-based growth, which is fantastic. Moving forward, as Bangladesh is already, the government is clearly saying in the voluntary national review that was done on SDG progress, Bangladesh needs to watch out so that inequalities don't grow. Because that is, of course, a risk as the economy grows, that inequalities would grow as well. And some of those warning signs of growing inequalities are already there, clearly visible in statistics, and that's something to watch out for.
Well, you know very well that Rohingya is the major issue for Bangladesh now. How do you view the latest situation of Rohingya in Cox's Bazar as well in Bangladesh?
The Rohingya refugee crisis is a very unique crisis in the sense that I don't think the world has seen anything of the scale and the size and the sheer magnitude of this crisis. The number of people that have crossed the border, the speed within, the time frame within which they came is absolutely extraordinary. What it has led to is one of the most densely populated and largest refugee camps in the world, which has come about within a very short period of time, which means there wasn't really time to plan. From that follows a lot of challenges, which obviously, you know, we are supporting the government in tackling in terms of water, in terms of sanitation, in terms of congestion, in terms of the risks of health and disease outbreaks.
But we need the permanent solution. What is your prediction actually? Then when can they return their country?
So I agree with you. I mean, the core of the problem is in Myanmar, and the solution of the problem lies in Myanmar. Yep. And the heart of this crisis is a crisis of human rights and systemic deprivation of human rights over decades. Now, the discussions between the government of Bangladesh and the government of Myanmar, these are at the moment bilateral discussions, so the UN is not really involved. Well, however, the government of Bangladesh has engaged the UN and UNHCR in particular, which is the agency in the lead from our side when it comes to return and repatriation issues. Well, we are very grateful for the government of Bangladesh's strong commitment that return of the Rohingya to Myanmar needs to be voluntary, it needs to be in dignity and safety, as you said. Exactly. It needs to be informed, and importantly, it needs to be sustainable. I mean, these heartbreaking stories of old people who have crossed the border several times when seeking shelter in Bangladesh. I mean, you know, you need to look at the root causes in Myanmar in order to be able to ensure a sustainable return. And the fact that the government of Bangladesh stands firmly behind these principles is very commendable.
What do you think? Is it possible within short?
Well, if you obviously follow what is happening on the other side. If you see what is happening in Myanmar, the conditions for return, meeting those conditions that we discussed earlier, are not in place yet. That's obvious.
Do you not think that it is a process of lingering the process?
Well, as long as people keep leaving, you can't expect them to return. So there needs to be continued international pressure on Myanmar to create conditions for return. those conversations are obviously going on within the UN, within a range of other institutions, and that's what needs to continue.
Bangladesh thinks that international communities should share more responsibilities on Rohingya issues.
I think it's important to recognize that, you know, the biggest contributor to this crisis is the government of Bangladesh and the people of Bangladesh.
Exactly.
And we should not forget, you know, the host community who were the first responders and who obviously are feeling the impact of this massive crisis on their daily lives more than any one of us sitting in Dhaka will understand. So it's important to recognize that the contribution from the government and the people of Bangladesh has been immense. And it goes from a big number of civil servants who have been seconded to Cox's Bazar, to the toll that it's taking on the local administration, to ensuring law and order, and of course to a commendable and growing input from national and local NGOs. The international community responded very generously to the humanitarian response plan. So the funding to the humanitarian response plan, which was, you know, the first 6 months of the crisis, was actually very generous. And we certainly hope and expect that that will continue under the joint response plan because of the principle of global burden sharing. It cannot be expected that Bangladesh would carry the burden of this crisis on its own. That's not acceptable. I don't think that's feasible, and that is certainly not what the global commitments commit UN member states to. So we certainly, from the United Nations, we are following up with the various member states who are taking a very keen interest in this crisis, and we expect that the good partnership that has been there will continue.
Ms. Seppo will talk more after a short break. দর্শক দেখছেন আরটিভি নিয়মিত আলোচনা অনুষ্ঠান ফোর্থরাইট। এই পর্যায়ে নিচ্ছি বিরতি, ফিরছি একটু পরে। সে পর্যন্ত আমাদের সাথেই থাকুন। দর্শক আবারও আমন্ত্রণ ফোর্থরাইট অনুষ্ঠানে। আজকে কথা বলছি বাংলাদেশের জাতিসংঘের আবাসিক সমন্বয়ক মিয়া সেপ্পোর সাথে। ওয়েলকাম এগেইন। দ্য ইউএন অ্যান্ড আদার এইড অর্গানাইজেশন আর স্ট্রাগলিং টু মোবিলাইজ ফান্ড ফর দ্য এমার্জেন্সি রিলিফস। হাউ ডাজ সলিউশন কামস টু রিজলভ দিস চ্যালেঞ্জেস?
I think it's a little bit too early to say that we're struggling to mobilize the funds. I mean, we are in the process of mobilizing the funds, so we don't know yet, what the response will be to the joint response plan. I think there's two things that's important to keep in mind. The resource requirements in the joint response plan is quite considerable. 950 million is a huge ask, so to speak. But that ask is actually based on very solid needs assessment. It's actually based on discussions to try to prioritize the needs. So it is not an exaggerated figure. It is a figure of real needs. But that figure includes both the life-saving operation in terms of the Rohingya, but it also includes support to the host communities, something that we have been called upon by the government to give importance and something that we recognize as very important.
Bangladesh and Myanmar have agreed to take assistance from the UN on Rohingya repatriation. How much time actually it may take for a concrete decision?
So the discussions at the moment between the two governments are bilateral discussions. They do not involve the UN. The governments are in parallel talking to the UN, and this is to UNHCR, which is our lead when it comes to return and repatriation, about return and repatriation. Right. So it's kind of different conversations, and the UN is not part of the bilateral discussions which are going on between the two governments.
Lingering of the refugee crisis will adversely affect Bangladesh economy. How does UN involve to overcome this crisis?
I think the first thing that is important to keep in mind is you know, that's a complicated question. So it's not all bad. You know, you also have jobs that are being created because of the crisis. You have a lot of supplies that are being procured for running the camp.
But it is for them. It is for Rohingya.
Yes, but
and we are also supporting Bangladeshi people, different organizations. They are sending food. They are giving support. I don't think so. It is our government and our Prime Minister did a great job to adapt them at a time within short period. But our economy was not ready to support them altogether.
What Bangladesh did in terms of keeping the borders open and providing shelter is absolutely extraordinary. It's an example of global solidarity that very few countries in the world is showing, unfortunately, these days. The analysis on the impact of the economy that's what I referred to in terms of the fact that of course it also creates jobs, it creates demand for a lot of supplies that are needed at the camp, which the local market can deliver. Now, the impact of the crisis, I think the very tangible one which we are very concerned about is the impact on the environment. So that's impact on the water table, its impact on agricultural land, but maybe most visible is the impact on the forest. So as you've seen, a lot of the forest has been cut down for fuel wood. Of the various initiatives under the Joint Response Plan, there's also a joint project to look at issues of reforestation, linked with providing alternative energy sources for the need for fuel within the camp. And that's absolutely critical because I think everybody is aware that this was one of the last forested areas in Bangladesh, and we need to see how we can revitalize the ecosystem. So that's a very high priority.
Madam Seppo, Bangladesh faces challenge to implement SDGs. Having this Rohingya crisis, how Bangladesh may integrate the SDGs implement and policies?
Well, I mean, the SDGs call for leaving no one behind. And Bangladesh has just shown to the world what it means to leave no one behind by providing shelters to people who are escaping persecution and discrimination and violence. So that's obviously part of the SDG story. Bangladesh has done a lot of work when it comes to really integrating the SDGs into national policies and plans. So from, you know, modeling in terms of priority SDGs to looking at the M&E framework, to looking at financing strategies, to looking at the fifth 7-year plan, all of this work has been done. The SDGs are more ambitious than the MDGs, but Bangladesh can build on the MDG achievement to achieve the SDGs. Key, there's obviously, you know, key in terms of ending poverty, in terms of gender equality, in terms of climate change and the environment, and in terms of SDG 16 on just inclusive societies, which is all about the governance piece, which is an important puzzle in the SDG achievement.
Well, let's talk about some other issues. What are the areas in which the United Nations wants Bangladesh to improve or to work?
So we are working closely with you know, across a range of ministries and the government to look at what are the priority SDGs. Well, we will certainly, you know, continue the dialogue about leaving no one behind. What does it mean in terms of equality? What does it mean in terms of making sure that marginalized and discriminated groups or regions that are left behind are part of the national agenda? We will continue to work closely with a range of partners when it comes to women's empowerment, an area where Bangladesh can be very proud of its achievement, but where still more needs to be done, in particular when it comes to violence against women, and making sure that, you know, women are safe, whether it's at home or whether it's in public spaces or whether it's at work.
Exactly.
And making sure that if there is injustices, then they can trust that they can seek justice through the justice system. I think a key priority, as we mentioned earlier, is quality education and skills upgrading. That's important for the labor force, whether it's for migration or whether it's for working within Bangladesh to have the skills that are needed. And then very important is the environmental sustainability. So not just looking at climate change, adaptation and mitigation, which is a big issue for Bangladesh, but also to look at environmental sustainability across the board in terms of how resources are being used. And then you have the issue of urbanization, which, Dhaka city is obviously a prime example of a vibrant, huge mega city, which needs to look at how it's planned, how it functions. Is it a city that is safe for people, that's comfortable for people, and that is environmentally sustainable? If you look at the air quality at Dhaka at this point in time, I think we certainly have some work to do.
We are almost end of the program. Any final thoughts you want to share with our viewers?
But I think my final thought is that I'm really happy to be in Bangladesh. It's a country that has a unique development story, and that development story has been created by everybody in Bangladesh, and it's very much also a story of the individual engagement, the civil society, the NGOs that has enabled the country to travel this journey from 71 to where the country is today.
Exactly.
It's also a fascinating place because if you look at the big global issues, not that absolutely all of them are relevant for Bangladesh. Climate change, urbanization, population movements, all of them come together in Bangladesh. So it is a country where there's huge opportunity and there's a very interesting conversation going on about global issues. And then you have Bangladesh as a very active member state of the United Nations and then participating globally in a conversation about these issues.
Thank you very much indeed, and we wish you all success in coming days, and see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
দর্শক, এই কথা অনস্বীকার্য যে বাংলাদেশকে জাতিসংঘের উন্নয়নশীল দেশের স্বীকৃতিতে আমাদের মর্যাদা বৃদ্ধি পেয়েছে বহুগুণ। দীর্ঘ 4 দশকের বেশি সময় ধরে জাতিসংঘ বাংলাদেশের কার্যক্রম অব্যাহত রেখেছে। দীর্ঘ এই সময়ে উন্নয়নমূলক কর্মকাণ্ডে সংস্থাটি যেমন অবদান রেখেছে, তেমনি চলমান রোহিঙ্গা সংকট সমাধানে জাতিসংঘের শক্তিশালী ভূমিকা আমাদেরকে আশান্বিত করে। ভবিষ্যতেও সহযোগিতার এই ধারাবাহিকতা অব্যাহত থাকুক, সেই প্রত্যাশায় শেষ করছি আজকের ফোর্থরাইট। এতক্ষণ আমাদের সঙ্গে থাকার জন্য ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে।